Vibha Chauhan and welcome to Jai Hind Classes Funda Clear. In this video, I will explain Class 12th Political Science Chapter 5, which is Challenges to and Restoration of the Congress System. Now, if you remember the second chapter of this book, which was one-party dominance, we studied about the domination of the Indian National Congress in the Indian political system. Now, in this chapter, we will study about how this dominance was being challenged in the 1960s decade. What were the problems that Indian National Congress was facing? And we will also see that how a new Congress was born with Indira Gandhi and how they overcame that challenge. So we will study about the challenge to the domination of the Indian National Congress in the political system, and you will get to know about a lot of things, because after Jawaharlal Nehru, what happened? Because we only know about Jawaharlal Nehru till now. We have discussed about him as the first Prime Minister of India, about his career as the Foreign Minister of India, but what about after him? So we will discuss about the situation of the Indian National Congress in the 1960s and 70s, 1972 till 1972 we will discuss. So without any further ado, let's get started with the first topic, which is challenge of political succession. Now in 1964, Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, died. He had died of natural cause because from the last year he had been ill. So it was natural that he died in 1964. Now there were serious questions that after Nehru, who will become the Prime Minister of the country, because the next general elections were to be held in 1967. So before that, the Indian National Congress had to choose a new Prime Minister. And the second challenge, which was even more posing question, it was that after Nehru what? Because Nehru had introduced democratic succession in the country, democratic process in the country, and we have already seen that many of the newly independent countries stayed away from having democracy in the country for the development, and that's why it was hard to say that what will happen after Jawaharlal Nehru. Will democracy sustain in the country, or will there be other type of government, or will the power go to the military? So there were serious challenges that what will happen to the political system of the country after Jawaharlal Nehru. Now let's see what happened after Jawaharlal Nehru in the country. Now after Jawaharlal Nehru, the Prime Minister was 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 Shastri, from Nehru to Shastri. Now, 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 Shastri was from the state of Uttar Pradesh, and he had been a minister in the cabinet of Nehru from 1951 to 1956. Now, he had been a railway minister, and he had resigned from that post, taking responsibility for a serious railway accident at that time. And one thing about him was that he was known for his simplicity. He was a simple leader with simple ideologies and had been a close colleague, had been a close person to Jawaharlal Nehru in his last year. Also, he had participated in the Indian national struggle from the 1930s. So we can say that all the political leaders of the Indian National Congress, with their president, which was K. Kamaraj, unanimously decided that 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 Shastri would become the second Prime Minister of country. Now, from 1964 to 1966, he was the Prime Minister of the country. And if you remember, in 1965, there was a war fought between India and Pakistan. So, 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 Shastri was the Prime Minister who led that war. And at his era, when he was the Prime Minister, there were serious challenges that the country was facing. Why? Because in 1962, we had already fought a war with China with great losses. So it was very obvious that there would be economic crisis in the country. Secondly, with that influence of the war, there were other serious climatic challenges as well. There were droughts and monsoons in the country. There were serious food shortages in the country. So of course there were many challenges, and he had to tackle with those challenges, and that's why his famous quote was Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. It meant that the military and the farmers are the one to develop the country, and that is why his focus for the work was to the peasants, was to the farmers of the country, because only with farmers there would be more agricultural production in the country, and with more agricultural production there would be less food shortage in the country, and that's why he had focused a lot on the farmers. Now his term of office came to an abrupt end, unfortunately, in 1966. If you remember, in 1965 the war was fought between India and Pakistan, and in 1966, after the end of the war, an agreement has to be signed between India and Pakistan. From India it was the Prime Minister 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪, and from Pakistan it was their Prime Minister General Ayub Khan. Now what happened? The agreement was to be signed in Tashkent region. Now at that time Tashkent was in USSR, now it's the capital of Uzbekistan. So it was known as the Tashkent Agreement for the same reason, because it was being signed in Tashkent city. Now there our Prime Minister 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 died of a heart attack. So we can say that his era came to an abrupt end in 1966. Now another question was that after 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪, who would be the Prime Minister of the country? Now let's discuss that with the next subtopic, which is from Shastri to Indira Gandhi. Now Indira Gandhi was the daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru. 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 was chosen as the Prime Minister of the country unanimously. That meant that every member of the Congress was happy, had agreed with that. But after Shastri, it was a serious question, because there was not an unanimous option. There was not an unanimous choice of all the leaders in the Indian National Congress. Some people were supporting Morarji Desai, while others were supporting Indira Gandhi. Morarji Desai was also a minister in the cabinet. He had also participated in the national struggle of the country. He had also a good political career. He was a very experienced political career. Now Indira Gandhi, she was a young political leader, and she was the daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru. What happened? The senior leaders of the Indian National Congress supported Indira Gandhi because she was new to the political career. She had been a minister in the Union Cabinet for Information, the Minister of Information, and she had also been the President of the Indian National Congress in the past. So the senior leaders of the Indian National Congress thought that if we choose a new leader who is not that much experienced, that means that they will Indira Gandhi will be dependent more on those leaders, will be dependent more on the senior leaders, and would seek their guidance. So ultimately they would be the one to control the political system, and that's why they chose the new leader, which was Indira Gandhi. Now, Indira Gandhi also faced challenge. Why? Because she had to lead the Indian National Congress for the next general election in 1967, because next general elections from the Lok Sabha elections for the country were to be held in 1967. So it was quite obvious that Indira Gandhi would be the one to lead the Indian National Congress. At the same time, there were still many supporters of Morarji Desai. Why? Because he had been a temporary Prime Minister of the country. When the Prime Minister dies, there is a temporary Prime Minister until new Prime Minister is elected or chosen. And that is why he had been twice the temporary Prime Minister of the country, and he wanted to be the Prime Minister of the country as well, the permanent Prime Minister for full 5 years as well. So there were still many kind of challenges within the Indian National Congress. Some kind of split was being formed. Now here the game changer was the general election of 1967, because in the history of the Indian National Congress, in the history of the Indian political system, the general elections of 1967 were very important. Why? Let's discuss that with the next topic, which is fourth general elections 1967. So fourth general elections 1967. Now just as I said that the elections of 1967, which were the fourth general elections of the country, were considered very important in the political and electoral history of the country. Why? Because this time the domination of the Indian National Congress was clearly challenged at various levels. So what were these elections and what were the outcomes of these elections? Let's discuss about them with the next subtopic, which is context of the elections. Now, before moving to the elections, we should see the situation of the country as well. What were the circumstances in the country? What were the conditions in the country? Now, the conditions of the country were very bad. Firstly, the Prime Minister of the country was considered as a political novice by many. There were many critics that came up claiming Indira Gandhi to be a political novice. Secondly, she had to take the control of Indian National Congress as well, because she was not given that much power. Just think about it. There were no politically active women in the government of the country. There were very less representation of the women, around 1-2%. So it was very hard for her to claim her own powers. She was being controlled by the senior leaders of the Indian National Congress. Secondly, the economic crisis of the country. If you remember the 5-year plans of the country, you would see that from economic planning, there was a kind of depletion and it moved towards the military expenditure. Thirdly, there was less infrastructure development of the country, reduced rate of industrialization in the country, depletion of foreign reserve exchange as well. Next to that was that we had fought many wars with China, with Pakistan. It depleted the resources of the country. So of course the people were facing many challenges. The unequal monsoons in the country, the droughts in the country, less agricultural production, food shortage in the country, unemployment in the country, rising prices of the common commodities in the country were the major problems. Another thing was that Indira Gandhi had to reduce the value of the Indian rupee. Earlier, $1 could be bought for 5 rupees. Now it rised up to 7 rupees. Now $1 could be bought with 7 rupees. So we could say that there was inflation going on in the country as well. And that is why many local people, the people of India, protested against this as well. Now these protests were not seen as the common people's demands. Rather, they were being seen as a failure of law and order in the country. So for this, Indira Gandhi was again being blamed. So we can say that overall, before the 1967 election, the 4th general election of the country was in complete turmoil. The country was in complete chaos, and that is why the 5-year plans had to be stopped as well because of these going circumstances. Now let's see another fact, which was non-congressism. Now, what was non-congressism? When the anti-Congress parties, the opposition parties of the country, saw that the country was in turmoil, the power of Indian National Congress was reducing. There was internal factionalism. There were internal factionalism within the Congress, and they were kind of splitting between the leaders in the Indian National Congress. Then the opposition parties saw it as an opportunity. What happened? Many parties, many anti-parties came together. Whether they were ideologically congruent or not, it didn't matter. They just came together and had a campaign against the Indian National Congress, because now they wanted to be united, because they had understood that it was very important for them to be united, because the Indian National Congress was dominating the Indian political system only because of their separate votes, and that is why they came together at a united front to counter-attack the domination of Indian National Congress. And this theory was given the name of non-congressism. There was a popular argument behind this theory as well, that the rule of the Indian National Congress was not with the interest of the common people. They were being undemocratic, and that is why there was a need for non-congressism. So we can say that the Indian National Congress was facing many challenges. Firstly, it was being internally divided. There was a kind of split between Indira Gandhi and the senior leaders of the Indian National Congress. The accommodation of the factionalism in the Indian National Congress could not be accommodated more, and that is why there were being internal fights in their party. Secondly, there were outside wars going on as well. The country's condition was in turmoil, was in chaos. Thirdly, it was connected with a political ideology, with different leaders, with different parties. All parties came together. So, of course, it was hard to tackle this election. It was seen that maybe the Indian National Congress would be defeated in this election. Now, what happened in this election? Let's see that as well. Electoral verdict. Fortunately, in 1967, the results of the general election came out, and the Indian National Congress succeeded in forming the party, succeeded in forming the government in the country. But the problem was they had reduced majority. They did get the majority in the country, but it was at the lowest tally till now. They were facing the election first time without Jawaharlal Nehru, and this time it was the lowest reduced majority of the Indian National Congress. It could be seen in state assemblies as well. The Indian National Congress lost in 9 state assemblies, and there was a party known as DMK, 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪. Now this party formed the government in Madras region, and in Madras state, in the whole country, it was the first anti-Congress party, non-Congress party, which formed the government on its own in the country. Now you would question that we also studied about the Communist Party of India. It also formed the government in Kerala state. So why are we saying that DMK was the first party? Because Communist Party of India formed the government with coalitions, and this party, DMK, was the party without any coalition. On its own, it formed the government in Madras. How could it be? Because they had a good political agenda. They had the support of different students in Madras region, and their campaign was anti-Hindi because they were against the imposition of Hindi as the official language of the country. Now, if you know that there are 2 official languages of the country, one is Hindi, second is English, and English use was to be denied, was to be stopped in 1965, and after that Hindi was to be continued as the only official language of the country for the official purposes in the country. Now against this, the anti-Hindi campaign was started by DMK in Madras, and that is why both the languages, Hindi as well as English, continue to be the 2 official languages of the country, and that is why DMK formed the government in Madras on its own. Now in 7 of the 9 states, the Congress party lost clear majority. They could not form because of the other parties got the majority, and in 2 other states, the Uttar Pradesh state and Madhya Pradesh, they had formed the government, but because of defection, because of their leader who had been elected representative, who became the representative MLA from that state, because of that, their defection, they went to another party, and that is why even after forming the government in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, they could not form the government. Why? Because the candidate who won that decided to leave the party, decided to join another party. So we can say that 9 states, which included the city of Delhi as well. Delhi, of course, is the union territory of the country, but it is allowed to have a legislative assembly as well, and that is where Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Madras and Kerala, these states, and West Bengal as well, these states were the states where the Indian National Congress lost clear majority, could not form the government, and even at the central level in the Lok Sabha election, it formed the government, but at least had the reduced majority. At least half of the MPs were not from the Indian National Congress. It only got the majority, enough to win, but not that much good majority as it had gotten in the early elections, and that is why it was concerning, because of course it was at the lowest point, it was facing many challenges. Now another thing that was brought into attention in this election, the 4th general election, were the coalitions. Now, what are coalitions. Coalitions when two or more parties form alliance to contest an election, because suppose nowadays coalitions are very common. No single party rarely get any majority. Now what happens, suppose there are many parties contesting in elections in the country, and if no party gets majority, then what would happen? Then what they do is that they form alliance and contest elections, and rather than a single party, the whole alliance wins or loses that particular election. And in this election, the fourth general election, many coalitions were formed. We'd be surprised to know that even their ideologies were different. Some were left-wing parties, some were right-wing parties, yet they came together because they had the agenda of non-congressism. So even if they were ideologically incongruent, they still formed the coalitions because their agenda was not to work for the welfare of the people. Their agenda was only to defeat the Indian National Congress. That was the thing that was going on, and the common people had to suffer. That is why you would be surprised. And they were known as joint legislative assemblies. In Hindi, it's known as 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪. Dal is your group, Vidhayak is your, the MLAs, and joint is 𝓥𝓲 in Hindi. So 𝓥𝓲 Vidhayak Dal, or in English, joint legislative assemblies, were formed in different states, and no other party, no single party except DMK had gotten a majority. In the 9th state where the Indian National Congress had lost the seats, could not form the government, there no single party came to form the government. Only the alliances, the coalition government were formed. So we can say that with this election, coalition came into attention. And examples of them could be, like for example, in Punjab, they were known as United Front. In United Front, there were two Akali parties which were just opposite of each other. One was the Master Group, second was the Sant Group. Both the Communist Party of India and Communist Party of India Marxism. We know that in 1964 they had split up. So why they came together to form the coalitions? Of course, because they had to defeat the Indian National Congress. So we can say that they just shoot their ideologies and just form the government, form the coalition just to form the government. As well as in the United Front, there were other parties as well. Like for example, the Bharatiya Janata Sangh, which was a right-wing party, and Communist Party is of course a left-wing party. So we can say that. And another example could be of Bihar. In Bihar, both the socialist parties, the PSP and the SSP, the left-wing parties and right-wing parties such as Bharatiya Janata Sangh, and left-wing parties such as Communist Party of India came to form the government. We can say that different parties just made a mixture of their own to form the government. Another thing that came into attention in these elections were defection. What is defection? Defection is when an elected representative decides to leave the party on whose symbol he or she had contested the election. So suppose if there is a candidate from BJP and he has won the election, he or she has won the election, and just after the declaration of election results, the person decides to leave the party because they are being offered something else in the different party, then the other party would form the government in that particular region, and that is why defection has been banned now. Now in India there is anti-defection law, but in the 1967 election there were no anti-defection laws. So what happened that in two states, in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, we saw the same situation. Congress party had formed the majority, but they could not form the government because of the defection. And there was a very popular saying at that time, which was Aya Ram and Gaya Ram, which means that Ram came and Ram went. What was this? It was a very popular joke and statement at that time. Now there was a political leader, which was Ram, and his full name was something different, but it was Ram, and he contested from Congress party. Now within a fortnight he changed the parties thrice, and you would be surprised, he was from the Congress party, then he went to join the United Front, then he again joined Congress, and within 9 hours he again joined the United Front. So we can say that now this popular statement was used to describe the defection in the country, and that is why it's being banned. Now if an elected representative decides to leave the party from whose symbol he or she had contested an election, then his seat would be invoid. Other person would get that seat, that person would definitely definitely not get the seat. So defection was also very common at that time. Now it's not legal in the country. Now the next topic here is split in the Congress. So split in the Congress. Now we have seen that the results of the elections came out and Congress was not able to form a good majority to form the government, and it also lost seat in many of the state assemblies. Now for the first time it was seen that Congress could be defeated. Now the non-Congress parties could see that even the domination of the Indian National Congress could be defeated. However, these parties, the non-Congress parties, failed to form government in many of the assemblies, the state legislative assemblies as well as the Lok Sabha assemblies. Why? Because first of all, they were not a single party. There were many coalitions and they were unable to keep a single stand. There were many kind of opposition within the coalitions. They were like fighting with each other, and that is why in many of the states president's rule had to be imposed, because they were not idly true to each other. Like for example, the Communist Party of India and Communist Party of Marxism of course are different. So how could they come together to contest elections? That was kind of thing. So they were ideologically incongruent, and that's why president's rule had to be imposed. Now split in the Congress, what does that mean? That means that there were kind of differences within the Congress itself. What were those differences? First was Indira versus the syndicate. Now the real challenge that Indira Gandhi as political leader faced was not from the opposition, it was from her own party itself. Why? Because there was a group within the party which was known as a syndicate. Now syndicate was an informal name given to the senior leaders of the Indian National Congress, which was headed by 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪. Now 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 was also had been a prime president of the Congress party. Now these leaders were the actual controllers of the Indian National Congress. It was believed that these senior leaders should resign so that young leaders would get more opportunity to lead the party. And the syndicate were the ones who chose everything, who decided everything in the party. And it was only with their own installation that the Indira Gandhi became Prime Minister of the country. 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪𝓷 also owed his post of Prime Minister to the syndicate of the Indian National Congress. Syndicate had chosen Indira Gandhi as the Prime Minister of the country because she was politically novice. She was new to the political system of the country, and that is why they believed that she would be more dependent on them and they would be the actual controllers as a Prime Minister. However, she did not want to give her power. She wanted to be independent, and that is why with the minister, with the advisors who were from outside the party and outside the syndicate, she decided to formulate policies which would lead to the ideologically difference in the country, in the Congress party. And now this political war turned into ideological war between Indira Gandhi and the syndicate. The first Council of Ministers of Indira Gandhi was also appointed by the syndicate of the Indian National Congress. So we could say that the syndicate were the ones who had the real power. It consisted of different leaders such as Atulya Ghosh of West Bengal, 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪𝓾𝓱𝓪𝓷 from Tamil Nadu, 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪𝓾𝓱𝓪𝓷 from Bombay, the present-day Mumbai and Gujarat. So we can say that there were different senior leaders who were politically experienced leaders who had been a part of the political system for a very long time, since the time of Jawaharlal Nehru, and that is why they were the actual controllers. Now what Indira Gandhi did was she wanted to orient the policy, the ideology of the party to the left-wing ideologies. With the Congress Working Committee, she formulated a 10-point program. What was the 10-point program? In this, there were many points, such as the land reforms. Another was nationalization of the banks. Another was nationalization of the general insurance, house ceiling. So we can say that she had adopted many left-wing policies. The syndicate officially had allowed this, but they were reserved at the same time as well. Now the next subtopic here is presidential election 1969. The main difference or the main conflict between Indira Gandhi and the syndicate came with the presidential election in 1969. After the death of Zakir Hussain, the then prime president of the country, there was a serious question that who would be the president of the country. Now, the syndicate or the Indian National Congress leaders wanted their own leader, that was N. Sanjeeva Reddy, also the Lok Sabha speaker. Now, this person, N. Sanjeeva Reddy, was the biggest opponent leader of Indira Gandhi. He was the biggest critique or opponent of Indira Gandhi. And that is why the syndicate had officially chosen him as the candidate of the Indian National Congress for the post of the president, which was vacant. Indira Gandhi, what did she do? She decided to support an independent candidate, which was the then vice president of the country, V.V. Giri. V.V. Giri was also a good leader. He had been a high commissioner to Ceylon, that is in Sri Lanka. He had also been governor to Kerala, UP and Karnataka, the then Mysore. Also, he had been politically active for a long time. He had been in cabinet as well. He had worked for a long time. And that is why Indira Gandhi decided to support him as an independent candidate to be the president of the country. He served as the president as the vice president from the period of 1967 to 1969. And after that, from the period of 1969 to 1974, he served as the president of the country. So we can say that for the presidential elections, the candidate which was supported by Indira Gandhi, V.V. Giri, won the presidential election. Now, there was a long process for the presidential election as well. Just before the presidential election, Indira Gandhi formulated other type of announcement. First was the abolition of privy purse. What were privy purse? Now, privy purse meant the privileges that were given to the princely states. In the chapter 1 of this book, we have already studied about the integration of the princely state, which was a hard task. So what happened that the Indian leaders at that time, the political leaders at that time, gave promises that if you merge in India, then there will be some extra privileges, special privileges that would be given to you. That means that it could be in form of heredity, it could be in the form of land or some governance power. And the extent of these privileges dependent on the basis of that merging state, the basis of the revenue, the power of that merging state. Now, this privy purse was to be abolished by Indira Gandhi, because if we look at the preamble of the country, what does the first point say? It talks about justice, which is social, economic and political, and of course privy purse was in clear conflict with that ideology, and that is why from the time of Nehru had also opposed to this, had also been opposition with this privy purse, and this was finally uplifted by Indira Gandhi. Even when she wanted to abolish the privy purse, it was opposed by leaders such as Morarji Desai, because he said that this was considered as a breach of faith with the princely state leaders, and that is why they could not afford to abolish the privy purse, because they had already given the promises, they had already failed them. And that is why in 1971 general elections, in the 1971 election, Indira Gandhi took it as a political agenda as well, that if she comes into power, then she would abolish the privy purse. So one point was announcement was that abolition of privy purse, then nationalization of the 14 biggest private banks of the country, which was a very huge task, and increased urban sealing as well. So we can say that before presidential election, it was considered that. Another thing was that the then Congress president, which was 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 from Bombay, he had given a whip. Whip is kind of power, and he had depicted that whip that all the MLAs and MPs from the Congress party would give vote to the official candidate of the Indian National Congress, which was N. Sanjeeva Reddy. So it was kind of, he had used his power, he had misused his power to give support to the official candidate of the Indian National Congress. This was opposed by Indira Gandhi, saying that there should be conscience of vote, which means that all the MLAs and MPs should be allowed to choose or elect the candidate which they want. in the way that they want, and we should not force them in the name of the party. And that is why 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 won the election, because there were more supporters to him. There was his work was appreciated more, and he had a great support of Indira Gandhi. So of course all the supporters of Indira Gandhi, the advisors at that time, also voted to him, and he became the president of India. And after this, after the announcement of result of the presidential election, major split in the Congress party came up. First Congress was the Congress Organizational, which was formed by the old leaders, the syndicate of the Congress party, and Indira Gandhi was thrown out of the Indian National Congress, and she formed a new Congress within the Congress, which was known as Congress Requisitionist. Now, because they had requisitioned before that they should be conscious of votes, and that is why their party came to be known as the Indian National Congress Requisitionist. Also, they were called as Old Congress and New Congress. Old Congress, of course, consisted of the syndicate, and New Congress, which consisted of Indira Gandhi. Now, both considered themselves as the true Indian National Congress. Indira Gandhi said that she was the true, her party was the true Indian National Congress, because they were having the ideologies of the initial Indian National Congress, which was formed for those purposes. And that is why it came to be seen that there were major differences split within the Congress party. And of course, Indira Gandhi was at a loss, because this Congress organization was huge in number. They were bigger party, they were having the most of the organizational structure, and she was a new party, and of course she hadn't been that politically active, and she was facing these many problems. So of course there were some losses to her party, and how did she manage it? Let's discuss that as well. The next topic here is the 1971 election and restoration of Congress. Now, Indira Gandhi wanted to gain her power, retain her power as a prime minister, and that is why she decided to take a very bold move, which was considered very bold by the many critics and many political leaders, and that was that she proposed the dissolution of the Lok Sabha Assembly in 1970, and that is why in 1971 election again had to be held in the country for the Lok Sabha, for the prime minister post in the country. So we can say that with these elections, if she got the support with her own for the Congress Requisitionist party, it meant that she would regain her power, and that is why she decided to take such a bold move. If you remember, in 1971 India also fought a war for Bangladesh. India and Pakistan fought a war, and Bangladesh was formed as a new country. So of course she had to gain massive support from the people. So let's discuss about these elections as well with the next subtopic, which is the contest. So the contest. Now let's discuss what happened actually in the 1971 elections, because these elections were very important for Indira Gandhi. She wanted to regain her power, and now she was not having support. She only was in power because of the support of the Communist Party and the Socialist parties, and all the non-socialist, non-communist parties were just opposing to her, the Indira Gandhi's Congress R. Now Congress Organizational is known as Congress O, and Congress Requisitionist is known as Congress R. So that's what we'll be saying in the chapter in the later parts. Now in the 1971 election, all the non-communist parties, all the non-socialist parties and the Congress O came together to form a very big alliance, and this coalition was known as the Grand Alliance. It consisted of Bharatiya Janata Sangh, the Swatantra Party, the Bharatiya Kranti Dal, the Congress O. It consisted of various parties which were opposing the government of Indira Gandhi, and in her response, Indira Gandhi did not have that much alliance. She only formed an alliance with the Communist Party of India. So we can say that, of course, in terms of numbers, in terms of alliance, the Grand Alliance was very big, and all the political thinkers of the country thought that the old Congress was more strengthened and it had more power and it would win the elections of 1971. But what they lacked was political agenda, a clear political agenda or issue to win the elections, because their main focus was to remove Indira Gandhi. That's what she said in her political campaign, the election campaigns. She had a clear political issue or agenda for campaigning in the election. She said that the opposition or the Grand Alliance main focus was Indra Hatao, that means remove Indra, while her focus was slogan. There was a very popular slogan said by her that was Garibi Hatao, which means remove poverty. So this slogan had gotten so much popular among the common people. And Indira Gandhi's main focus on the population of India were the vulnerable sections, the minorities such as the Dalits, the Adivasis, the women or the underprivileged society of the sections. And that is why her main political issue was that she would abolish all the privileges that were given to the princely state. She would impose more urban ceilings and more ceilings on the rural property of the landlords. So we can say that she had a clear conscience of the political campaigns, of the political agenda that she needed for her agenda in the elections, and that is what the opposition lacked. As I just explained, that their main focus was to remove Indira Gandhi, to form their own government, and that is why Indira Gandhi gained very much support. Now what about the election results? Let's discuss that as well with the next subtopic, which is the outcome and after. Now, the outcome of the political elections of 1971 were as dramatic as the choice or as the decision to hold these elections, because dissolving the Lok Sabha was a very big task, because in 1972 there had to be elections, the general elections of the country, but Indira Gandhi dissolved the Lok Sabha of 1970 and had to hold new elections in 1971. So it means that it was a very dramatic decision, and the results were as dramatic. Why? Because Indira Gandhi won with a very clear majority. The highest tally of votes as well as the seat won in the history of the Indian National Congress was in these elections. She, with her alliance of Communist Party of India, won more than 300 seats. She won 375 seats, and out of the 375 seats, 352 were won by her own party, which was Congress R. And also in the tally of votes, the alliance of Indira Gandhi got 48.2%. So it was very high. Comparing to the Grand Alliance, it was considered as a grand failure, because the Congress O got only 16 seats. Even with the alliance, they could not have so many seats, and the proportion of votes were also very low. So we can say that Indira Gandhi had gained clear majority, and the main reason was that she got support from the underprivileged sections of the society, the poor of the sections of the society, the poorest of the poor, the Dalits, the Adivasis were her main focus, and that is why she got support for them. Another thing was that she was the first prime minister, the first woman prime minister of the country, and that is why many women also came up to support her. So that is why we can say that in 1971 election she won. And what happened after she won? She regained her power. Now her Congress was seen as the real Congress, while Congress O was forgotten. It was kind of seen that their Congress was different and her Congress was the real Congress. Another thing was that after coming to her power, you know that when she was made as a prime minister in 1971, just after that there were conflicts in East Pakistan and Indo-Pak war happened. In that war, after she won that war, India won that war and Bangladesh was formed, she gained massive support from the people, because people had great wounds. They had great deprivation, they had great depressions of the 1962 war. So winning the 1971 war was a very great feat for India, and that is why the popularity of Indira Gandhi was very much in the country. It got risen to a very next level in the country, and even her opposition came to support her. Even they admired her statesmanship. She was seen as a leader for the poor, and she was also seen as a strong nationalist leader, and that is why in the 1972 state elections, the Congress party regained its domination. In most of the states of the country, they formed the government. They had clear majority in all of the states of the country. So that's why we can say that reviving the Indian National Congress was a huge task, and it was done by Indira Gandhi. And we could see from different steps it was very hard task, because being an only woman, and that's also very new in the political career, was a huge task. Even from her own party, she did not have that support, because she owed her position of prime minister to the syndicate, and that is why she had to regain the power. And she regained in 1971, and the result could be seen in the 1972 state elections. Now, what happened after that? After that, there is a question that was it really the restoration of the Indian National Congress? Now, rather than saying that it was a revival or restoration of the Indian National Congress, it could be seen that the Congress party was reinvented by Indira Gandhi, because it was now different from the old Indian National Congress. Why? Firstly, the internal factionalism got reduced to very much. Why? Earlier, there were a lot of factions. If you remember, in the one-party dominance chapter, we discussed that Congress, though dominated the political system, but had a lot of political factionalism within it. That factionalism reduced a lot. So we could say that only the particular section of the society that were the poorest of the poor, all the vulnerable sections of the society, were given representation in the new Congress. Other thing was that the capacity of the Indian National Congress to hold up the tensions between the different sections of the society also got reduced. So we can say that rather than saying that the Congress party was restored, it's better to say that it got reinvented by Indira Gandhi. There were new provisions that came up in the Indian National Congress, and that is why after the government was formed of Indira Gandhi, it was seen that the announcement that were made earlier, there were many problems to it. The very existence of democracy was being challenged. That is what we will be studying in the next chapter, which talks about emergency that was imposed in 1975, because it posed a serious threat to the very existence of democracy. There were many popular unrest in the country. There were many popular struggles, protests in the country against the unemployment, against the poverty in the country, because Indira Gandhi's focus now turned somewhere else to regain her power, and that is why there were many challenges to democracy of the country, and that is what we'll be studying in the next chapter. So that's all we have studied in this chapter. We saw that how Congress was facing many challenges. We saw that DMK became the first party to win election other than the Indian National Congress on its own. Now, even today in Tamil Nadu, it holds up the power. The leader is M.K. Stalin, as you might know that. And we also said that with Indira Gandhi, the Congress got reinvented rather than being revived. So that's all. We have covered all the topics and subtopics, and the next chapters of this book will be covered in the further upcoming videos. So stay tuned for upcoming videos. Thank you very much.